Welcome. We are glad that you're here with us today. It is Mother's Day on this Sunday. You may not see the video until later in the week, but we're very thankful that you are here. And to all those who are moms or serve in a capacity like a mom, those who bless others, we celebrate you today, just as we celebrate our mothers here today. And we thank God for each of you and for those serving in the children's ministry today, those serving in the nursery. It is a day like typical on a Mother's Day, or I guess on a Father's Day, either way, where, some people celebrate, some people give thanks, some people kind of bemoan the situation they grew up in, so it's always one of those that's a little challenging to talk about. But I want to talk today about parenthood, really. I'll refer to mothers, and so the first statement that I want to make to you this morning, kind of in the way of the Beatitudes that Jesus spoke in Matthew chapter 5 when he was gathered around with a big group and his disciples he was speaking to intentionally and personally. My own Beatitude, but in the keeping with the ones that are there. Blessed are the children whose mothers have taught them to wait on the Lord, to trust in the Lord. Blessed are those children. And in the same way, blessed are the mothers who have taught their children. And again, that can apply to fathers just as well, and you'll get your day coming when we address you as well. But there's a special place that moms have in the hearts of their children. There's a special opportunity. And I want to talk about that this morning. I will refer back to the Beatitudes again, but I invite you to look this morning with me at Psalm 37. Psalm 37 is a long psalm, and we're not going to go through all of it this morning, but I'd like us to look at least the first 9 verses. Psalm 37 it's a psalm written by David, the one we celebrate as King David, the one who was recognized as a shepherd, a literal shepherd who had learned, I think of it in terms of, well, no offense to David as a male, but I think of it, kind of the role that he played is what I think of as a mama bear with her cubs. We have friends and family in the western North Carolina mountains, and in one of those places in particular, a lot of development has been occurring, and they've been speaking of caution, be careful, because bears have been much more common in the middle of neighborhoods, in the middle of communities, and they've been warning, hey, be careful, because not just any bears, mama bears have been there, and mama bears with their cubs. And if you ever want to pick a fight that you're guaranteed to lose, pick a fight with a mama bear when her cubs are around, right? I mean, it's just known. And it's that kind of relationship. It's that kind of protection. It's that kind of investment. It's that kind of nurturing. It's that kind of guarding, and so on and so forth, that I want you to have in mind this morning, even as we read a psalm written by a man, David, but one who served in the role of a shepherd, who was responsible for doing those very same things for sheep, for those who were defenseless, those who were ignorant, those who were unable to know the way forward that they should go. And it was that man, it was that heart, it was that mind, that intentional service in the way he served that God chose to eventually be king of his people, shepherd of his people, if you will. And he has something to say to us today that I think is particularly relevant in our society. You've heard me speak about this a number of times lately, and I'm going to speak about it again this morning because it's so prevalent in our society right now, and that is the anxiety that so many are feeling. Anxiety because of a number of things, one of which is the divisiveness, all the division that's in our country right now, the politics, the anger, just so many things that are there. And when I say I'm going to talk about it, I'm not going to get into depth about it, but I want to acknowledge it. not just those things, but also the world stage that we're living in. I mean, how do you not know today about all of the strife and struggling and difficulties? Speaking of strife and struggling and difficulties, you don't have to look very far, and maybe you are yourself dealing with this. Our economy is in difficulty. I mean, and there are many that right now say, whoa, our economy's going great because the stock market's up, and wow, we're in good shape. But if you own an automobile, you might argue with that. If you are on the lower end of the income scale, the reports are consistent in saying that the experience of those that are thriving with the stock market is not the case for those on the lower income level. And that group is expanding rapidly. So there are a lot of people dealing with difficulties today. And again, it's a great opportunity to speak not only into the middle of that kind of a situation, that kind of a context, but also what might be done about it. What might be done in the sense of how do we, in the middle of this crisis, if I can say it that way, speak into the lives of those that we parent, those that we guide, those that we have influence over, those that we try to comfort, those that we try to encourage. And not just for those, but for ourselves. How do we respond in a situation like this? So again, Psalm 37 this morning, we'll take a look at. Sorry. Place marker in the wrong place. Psalm 37 begins, do not fret. And I want to stop right there and say I'm reading out of the NIV, and I'm pointing that only to say not that there's anything special about the NIV, but I really like the CEV, the Contemporary English Version. Instead of do not fret, it says do not be annoyed. Now it has my attention, because I don't fret. At least I don't think I fret. Maybe I do fret, but I don't call it fretting, right? But annoyed? Oh yeah, now you got my attention. Now you're speaking my language. Do not be annoyed because of those who are evil, or be envious or jealous of those who do wrong. Well, you've definitely got my attention now. I'm all ears, right? For like the grass, they will soon wither. Like green plants, they will soon die away. I don't know what you think when you read that. I hope you're encouraged. I hope that you find in that some comfort, some sense of reassurance. But I'll tell you what I think when I read that, particularly verse 2. They will soon wither, those who are evil. They will soon die away. In other words, they will be no longer. And immediately pops into my head, because those of you who know me well know I think in questions. The question that comes to my mind is when?
Yeah.
Right? How long we gotta wait? That's exactly right. When? That's, irrelevant if we're in an academic setting and I'm just teaching on this. But when we're in a crisis, when we've got stuff going on and real people struggling, I want to know when. So I'm looking for the next verse to tell me when. And it says, trust in the Lord and do good. Maybe they left out part of it. That didn't address the when. It says, trust in the Lord and do good. Dwell in the land and enjoy safe pasture. Take delight in the Lord, and He will give you the desires of your heart. By this point in time, I'm reading along and I'm thinking, yeah, okay, this is good, but what about the when? What about when you're actually going to do something, Lord? He continues, commit your way to the Lord. Trust in Him and He will do this. He will make your righteous reward shine like the dawn, your vindication like the noonday sun. For some reason, He's not talking about them and when they're going to be gone. He's focused on me, not on them. What I'm supposed to do. Be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him. Here again is that fret word. Do not fret, or do not be annoyed when people succeed in their ways. Now, in the context of this, he's not just talking about anybody. He's talking about the evil. He's talking about those that are annoyed. Don't be annoyed when these people succeed in their ways, when they carry out their wicked schemes. He's still talking about me. He's still talking about the reader or the listener or the audience, the ones who are annoyed by the wicked. Well, I thought they were going to disappear. Refrain from anger, verse 8 says, and turn from wrath. Do not fret. It leads only to evil. Do not be annoyed. And if I can expound on that, do not be annoyed because it leads to anger. And if you're really angry, it's not a guarantee, but it can lead us into sin. It can lead us into acting wrongly. Again, this is all of a sudden, and not just a sudden, but he goes on and on. He's talking about us and what we're supposed to do in this crisis. For those who are evil will be destroyed. I know, Lord, but when? But those who hope in the Lord will inherit the land. Now, I know in context, and maybe you do too if you're familiar with the Old Testament at all, that the land was a big deal to the audience. Land was a big deal to the Hebrews. Land was a big deal to the Israelites because they didn't have any, right? You remember when God called Abram out of his family, out of his familiar place, and he promised to make a people out of him, and he promised to bless all other peoples through him. A part of his eventual covenant with Abram, who became Abraham, was that he would have his own land. And that was a big deal, because you remember when he called Abram to leave his family, he called him to leave everything he was familiar with, and he sent him to a place that he didn't even tell him initially. Talking about an uncomfortable situation. Talking about a situation which requires a lot of trust. Talking about a situation that's unnerving and potentially threatening, maybe even life-threatening, because you're going to call me, Lord, to go to a place that other people are already living. It's their place. But he reassures Abram by saying, I will give you a land that will be your own. In other words, I will give you a place where you can and your family can survive. You can produce the food that you need. You can grow the crops. You can have the animals you need to provide for you and your family. Okay. There's no promise of grandiose arrangement here. That's not what he's talking about. Way back in the beginning of the Old Testament. But it's still full of uncertainty. It's still full of a lot of potential danger and harm. And so when he's focusing here on the inheriting the land, that speaks to the people he was writing to in that day. It speaks to the people who would have heard in that day. Because, to say it in a different way, you and your family will have a place of your own and you'll be provided for. Now that's relevant today. Maybe the land, maybe not the land. But when you tell me I'll have a place of my own, when you tell me my family and I will be provided for, when you tell me we'll be able to get along in the world, if you will, well, that relates. I can get that. Particularly in a situation like ours today, where a lot of people are really wondering if that's possible anymore. In a country that, you know from looking at me, I'm not young. Once upon a time when I was young, it never entered my mind that I wouldn't be able to have a place, maybe not great big mansion, but a place to live in. It never entered my mind that I wouldn't be able to afford a house. It never entered my mind that I wouldn't be able to get a job and keep it and work at it for a while. That's not the case. Some of you who are younger are, I'm sure, well aware. I mean, jobs that have been secure, jobs that have been promoted, like the tech industry. Wow, talking about being in a precarious spot today. Wow, you got a great job with a software company as an engineer today, because tomorrow it may be gone. I mean, that's real time, not here, but that's real time when I look at my phone and I read about what's going on. What is happening? I bring those things up to say that sometimes it's difficult to enter into this conversation because we're not an agrarian society, right? And this was written to people who were. So the language is a little different, but it makes sense to me when I begin to relate it and think, yeah, okay, I get this. And then particularly the point he's making here, Lord, why is it? Why is it that, I was taught, like hopefully many of you, well, if I'll become educated in whatever way I needed to get the job that I was pursuing, and if I was faithful and responsible and dependable, it would go well, and I would be able to begin to form a life that I wanted to have. Now, granted, I didn't want it to maybe stay there. I wanted to do better and be promoted and so forth. And someday I hope to retire, right? Not destitute retiring, but retiring and have enough to live off of, and maybe even be able to enjoy retirement. This is the life that I grew up being taught. Not only was possible, but was likely if I did these things. Now, it's called into question. Now, well, frankly, in a country that has, with very few exceptions, never doubted its power. Never doubted its power. Now, I got to ask you another question. When I say power, what do you think? When I put it in the context of we as a country have never really doubted our own power, what comes to mind?
Never come close to being conquered, taken over by
Right.
other.
So military,
Yeah, or
or political or whatever way, never been threatened since the founding of our country, which we're celebrating here 250 years. We've never really been threatened or felt like someone was going to invade or take us over. That's definitely a power we count on. But I wonder if there's another power. Oh, I'm getting a consternation look.
Yep.
Why?
Well, if you were on the West Coast
Yeah,
in 1941,
yeah,
you were very worried about
okay,
invasion.
okay, all right. So there were a group of people in our country, maybe a big section of people, that were quite concerned, and so we went to war. I suspect, and I don't mean to get into a debate over this, but I suspect that part of the angst that came out of the Vietnam War was because of a lot of political junk and disagreements over what really needed to happen. And there were, unfortunately, from my perspective, a lot of men and women who suffered mightily because of all that junk going on, not in their hands. I doubt very seriously most of the men and women who were serving on the ground had much of a say in what we did. And when they returned home, the very people that perhaps were fearful of being invaded.
Yeah, I'm referring to World War II.
No, I'm sorry. Let me go back to that. Yeah, because I took off in Vietnam. Yeah, World War II possibly, with all the internment camps and things like that. Yeah. I still wonder though, and it doesn't change my response to that in the sense that did we as a people really fear our whole country being taken over? Maybe we did. But for the most part, I still hold to the fact that our country has experienced a degree of security, a sense of well-being. Both military and the other power that I'm referring to is economic. Difficulty, sure. Ups and downs, yeah. But never the lows like other places in the world who have experienced long-term and drastic uncertainty. Again, go back to the Great Depression. There was a lot of suffering. But we came through it. So when we look at ourselves today, at all generations, and we ask the question, why are we fearful? Why are we anxious? Why are we concerned? There's a lot of reporting going on right now from every side that says we just don't know what to count on that we used to count on, because everything seems to be changing. When I look at the history of God's people, which is part of why Psalm 37 stands out, but also other passages like Isaiah 40, where in that case, the prophet Isaiah is speaking to a people who are in exile. They're in Babylon. It's already happened. They've already experienced a radical change and departure from who they had been. And the Lord says, comfort, at the beginning of that chapter 40. And at the end of it, he says, for those who wait on the Lord, those who hope in the Lord, they will what? Anybody familiar with that? Paraphrase, you don't have to quote it. They will have their strength renewed. It's meant as encouragement. And when I read this psalm, even though it, for the better part of what we've read, departs from talking about what's going to happen to those, if you'll allow me to just say bad people, those people who are doing what I don't think they should do, those people who are actually working against us and the good of us, those who are taking advantage and looking out only for themselves, those who are, in fact, not even living according to the Lord's teaching. What are we to do? I referred to the way many of us grew up, and much of that teaching, not as a negative. Please don't hear that. I grew up with that myself, and I'm very grateful for what my mom and dad, you've heard me talk about that many times, how grateful I am for what they taught me. But that alone, in this day and age, things might not have turned out the way they have. There was another component. And I don't mean to state it in such a way that sounds like I consider it equal. I was taught to trust in the Lord. I was taught to trust in the Lord because the circumstances I live in may change. And I may have the education, the training, the experience, the support of income, and so on, to help me navigate the changes. But the day may come when all of those things together aren't enough. And in fact, even if I have success with all those things, a day will come when none of that matters anymore. A day will come when those very things, all those things, end. And then what? And I'm not just talking about life after death. I'm talking about what happens when all the things we've counted on, that we have worked for in this life, that we have aspired to, that we have wanted to gain and to acquire and to possess. What happens when those things no longer meet my need? If that's all I have, I'm in trouble. And I would suggest that that's where we are today as a people. The psalmist says we must trust in the Lord. The psalmist says, take delight in the Lord. What's he talking about? Take delight in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of his heart. Great! Maybe. What's he talking about? Commit your way to the Lord. Trust in him, and he will do this. He'll do what? Be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him. What are we waiting patiently for? What are we expecting him to do? We'll get rid of all the bad people, right? You still with me? We talked about that earlier. I was fussy because it didn't tell me how he was going to do it and when. Don't be annoyed when they're all succeeding and doing well, and by implications better than I am. Maybe even not just better than I am, but maybe instead of. Then what? I mentioned to you at the very beginning, blessed are those mothers and fathers who teach their children to wait on the Lord. I can't think of many things that frustrated me more as a little kid, old enough to know. I mean, not that little. I can't think of many things that frustrated me more as a little kid than when I really wanted something and my mother said, well, not now. You got to wait for it. Because nothing in my life taught me that waiting was good. Nothing. And I can report to you that that apparently was true because as I've grown up, that's still been the message. Who wants to wait? I won't get into patience today, but they're really related. Who wants to wait? Wait on the Lord? Oh my goodness, no offense. You and I both know what happens when we wait on the Lord. How is this encouraging? How is this good news? It must just be Old Testament teaching. Thankfully, we don't have to worry about this since Jesus has come, right? Except for the fact that in the Beatitudes, in Matthew 5, chapter 5, Jesus says some strange thing like, blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth, the land. The meek. You've heard this discussed before, perhaps. He's not talking about weakness. He's talking about humility and dependence upon the Lord. Trust. This very thing. Commit your way to the Lord, Psalm 37 verse 5 says. Trust in him, and he will do this. He will make your righteous reward shine like the dawn. That beatitude, by the way, Matthew 5 verse 5, the meek will inherit. Jesus happened to pull that right out of the psalm. Verse 11, beyond our reading today. But the meek will inherit the land and enjoy peace and prosperity. It does require that we have a long view. It does require that we look into the next life sometimes, because some of the things that we want to see happen, like the wicked done away with, and for us to have it good, if I can say it that way, may not happen until we are on the other side. We may not see that kind of blessing. We may not see. But will we know that it is the case? Well, if those that from a little age we learned to trust, before I could understand who God was or is, it was those who brought me up that were the authority. It were those who brought me up. It was those who brought me up that taught me how things would be, and in fact already were. It was those who brought me up who taught me what was right and what was wrong, and what was true and what was false, and how to discern, how to know, depending on who I was with. Could I trust them, or did I need to watch carefully? So what is it? What is it about this idea of trusting in the Lord and being humble before Him, being in full dependence upon Him? What is this message? This message is as one of those caregivers, as one of those nurturers, as one of those guides, as one of those who taught me everything I entered into the thinking world, how to navigate this uncertain, oftentimes evil, not out to help me, but to harm me, world. Don't just count on your strength. Don't just count on your resources. Don't just count on your abilities. Because any or all of those things not only are possibly going to fail, at some point they will fail to be enough. But if I trust in the one who is faithful, and let's remember that the Bible, front to back, is full of examples of the way God has been faithful, even when His people have not been. Trust in Him because He doesn't fail. Trust in Him because He doesn't forget. Trust in Him because He doesn't leave us. Submit yourself to His way and His authority. That's the kind of teaching, investment, and nurture from a parent that lasts and produces good results forever. You can count on that. This is the message that we are given, not only in Psalm 37, but as Jesus was beginning to instruct in the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew chapter 5, 6, and 7, when He was forming and shaping and informing His disciples. What does it look like to live as a successful citizen of the kingdom of heaven? What does it look like? What are the values? Where is the power? What is the strength? And this is why when we look at the teachings of Jesus that are so countercultural, even today in our own country, so countercultural, we, the people of God, we, the faithful, it is upon us to not only share with others what is truly good news, because it's dependable, but point people to the one who's faithful, the one who never fails. That's a message any child would benefit from, and any parent would be blessed in sharing. May the Lord help us to be successful in reminding each other and teaching those who follow us to count on. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.